You got a good rolling chair?
Yeah, I'm working on.
All right. I didn't even know you had one.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm showing it's just after 1 o'clock. So thank you for joining us today for the operational budget training. And I'd like to introduce the CCOC Executive Director, Jason Welty, to say a few comments.
Thanks, Griffin. Again, as Griffin said, thank you all for being here. I show we've got 81 people on right now. That's amazing. And this is something that I'm very excited about. The operational budget has been something that we've worked on a little bit each year. We've tried to make some changes. I think we made some bigger changes in 2018, but we've really not. We've discussed working on the operational budget each year. Let me rephrase. But now we're with Griffin's hard work and the work group's hard work, and thank you to Clerk Rhodes for getting this done and through the budget committees and the executive council. I am excited about the possibilities of what this operational budget is going to do for us in future years as it relates to how we take a look at how we're doing our budgets. And so it's an exciting time, and I'm glad everybody is on today to look through this training. I see a lot of names that I recognize, so I'm glad to welcome everybody. And that's it for me. I just wanted to say thank you for being here, and I'm looking forward to seeing the operational budget in this new format. And I'm going to let Griffin take us away on this magical journey we know as operational budget training. So go ahead, Griff.
All right, thank you, Jason. And thank you again, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. A recording of this training will be available on the CCOC website in the next few days. So if you're not able to make it, or you want to refer back to what we talked about, that will be on the CCOC website. If you have any questions, as always, please just use the raise your hand feature anytime that a question comes up, and we can address it at that point. And a note before we jump in, since this is the first iteration of the revised operational budget forms, we will inevitably run into a few issues with the forms. We are working on those. We found one or two so far. So we will send out corrected, revised versions of these very soon, either this afternoon or tomorrow. And I'm sure as we work through this, a few other issues will come up, so we'll just address them at a time. So please be patient. We're doing the best we can. And a huge thank you to Leonard Carper in our office for being our forms guru and for making all of this happen. So, all right, so let's jump in. So the operational budget previously, until this year, had three components, right? It had the certification letter that was signed by the elected clerk. It had a second revenue projection form in the year that we did a few months after the one that's submitted in June. That has since been scrapped. And then we had the operational budget Excel spreadsheet, which is the 10-tab spreadsheet that collected current year budget projections. So last year, the CCOC Budget Committee established the Operational Budget Work Group, chaired by the incredible Clerk Rhodes from Union County. And again, that's under the purview of the CCOC Budget Committee. And they tasked this work group to do two things. One is to draft a proposal to collect prior year actual expenditure data. And the second one was to potentially streamline and improve that existing 10-tab spreadsheet that collects the current year budget projections. So the work group met multiple times. And thank you to Clerk Rhodes, and thank you to Clerk Green as the chair of the budget committee and all the staff that served on this work group. They did incredible work and came up with what was approved and what was sent out a few weeks ago. So now the submission package still has 3 components. It has an updated 2-page signed certification letter, which again will need to be signed by the elected clerk. We now have a prior year actuals 2-tab Excel spreadsheet that collects prior year actual expenditure data by UAS code. And then we have a revised current year budget projections Excel spreadsheet that took the 10-tab spreadsheet, reduced it down to 4, and it still collects the current year budget projections, but now it's by UAS code. A note on this is the tab B personnel tab. That's the huge tab that collects all of your data. We'll go over that in a second. All of your staffing data, that remained the same. That was not changed by the work group. So that was one of the 10 tabs. Now it's one of the 4 tabs. So a few highlights for the operational budget. Like all of our CCOC reports, it should be submitted to reports@flccoc.org. It's due by Friday, March 14th. We do have an instructions document that we revised and is available on the CCOC website. And as always, feel free to reach out to myself or anyone on the CCOC team if you have any questions as you fill it out. The last thing I say before we'll jump into the actual forms is the thought process of the work group on why we moved to breaking all of this information out and collecting it by UAS code. So Section 218 of the Florida statutes requires clerks to prepare their annual budgets with the expenditures itemized by the uniform accounting system prescribed by the Department of Financial Services. So DFS puts out and updates the UAS manual, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. So the thought process of the work group was, since your ledger and your books are likely already laid out in this, by UAS code, or at least you have the ability to do it since it's required each year, that this would be a lot easier to just take that data that you already have and just break it out by court, non-court. And so that's why the decision to move this to UAS code was made. And again, we have the UAS code available on our website, as well as in the instructions document for the operational budget. We have excerpts related to the UAS object and account codes with those definitions in there for a reference. Before we jump into the spreadsheet, any questions? Seeing none. All right. So the revised 2-page certification letter. This was broken out into 2 different certifications with 1 signature. So the first page is certifying the prior year 23-24 expenditures, but it's very similar to what we had previously. And the second page is certifying your current year 24-25 budget projections. Again, very similar to what was the information on there previously. And then you sign on the bottom, again, elected clerk with the county and the date, and then you can send that in with your email submission to the CCOC. And again, I mentioned the instructions document. It's 71 pages, but most of that is the UAS code PDFs that we had. I think it's only 15 or 16 pages of actual instructions. So feel free to check that out. And as always, again, you can give the CCOC a call. So the first spreadsheet that we have is the prior year actual spreadsheet. And a little bit later, Clerk Rhodes has generously agreed to fill out some of this data so you can see kind of how it's filled out from her general ledger. But this spreadsheet, again, is laid out by UAS code. So across the top are the UAS account codes that we thought were applicable. And then down the side in columns B and C are the UAS object codes grouped by salaries and benefits costs, operating costs, and then we rolled the capital costs into one line on line 51. You may not use all of the UAS codes, and that's fine. The work group thought it would be beneficial to put any potential UAS codes that could be used. And then that way there's more, not less. So we'll see, over the next few years, if there's any lines that are left blank. And if so, at that time, we can potentially remove them then, but we'd rather have more than less. So don't feel like you're required to enter all of these UAS codes. If it's blank, that's fine. You can just leave it blank and move on. And again, though, like all of our forms at the top, you'll just indicate the county from the drop down, and then you can put your contact information for whoever, if we do have questions, who the correct staff person would be for the CCOC to reach out. And then version, similar to the rest of our forms, you can start with version 1, and then if you need to send a revised, you can do 2, 3, 4, etc. So it's pretty straightforward on how it's filled out. A few highlights that we would note are in columns K, L, and P, which is the 713 information systems, 715 legal aid, and then other. If you enter any information in that, you'll be prompted to fill out additional information and explain what those charges are down in the additional comments box, as well as any capital costs. Most of the time, most offices don't have capital costs, but if you do, any entries on line 51 will prompt you to provide a little bit of detail in the additional informations box. There are totals by salaries and benefits on line 26, totals for your operating costs on line 48. Then obviously there's one line for your capital costs. Everything is totaled down on line 54 as well as in column Q. And so that is where your totals will be for all of your prior year courtside expenditures for 23-24. The supplemental information, which is on lines 58 through 66, that's not listing additional information to the costs that are totaled on line 54. That's just more of a detailed breakdown of some of your salaries and benefits costs listed up here between lines 11 and 25. The work group decided that it would be beneficial data to have some of that broken out. So these costs should be included in your total cost in your total salaries and benefits line on line on line 26. So I think that is all of the information. If you have any other information you think is beneficial or pertinent that the CCOC know, as always, you can just enter it into the additional information box in addition to the other prompts you receive as you fill it out. I see
Hey, Griff, yeah, I was getting ready to say we have a hand.
Thank you, Jason. Dwala.
Now, just good afternoon. What if we can't break out that dental and vision at that bottom portion? Is that going to be a problem?
No, that's not an issue. If you're not able to break it out, you don't have to. If you could just let us maybe know that in the comments box and just say, dental plus vision is X, or you could put it all in the full amount in dental and just say, hey, we don't break this out, but the amount we put in dental is dental and vision.
Okay, thank you.
But great question, thank you. Are there any other questions on this particular tab? Seeing none.
Griffin, it's Kelly.
Oh, hey.
I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand. To Dwala's question, remember that is only employer funded. So if it's employee dental or vision, you would not include it at all on this report.
Yes, I'm aware. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Clerk Rhodes. Okay, so there's no questions on the UAS tab, the reconciliations tab. So this is a summary tab laid out, hopefully similar to your ledger, that breaks out the rolled up information, trying to reconcile your total courtside expenditure costs with your total courtside revenue sources, and hopefully net to zero in cell E27. So the first 5 lines, the fines and fees revenue, the prior year September revenue less the current year September revenue, those first 3 lines in blue, those will all auto-populate. But any lines in blue that auto-populate, you can override if needed. But this should pull from your actual September EC report that you submitted to the CCOC. So the first 3 lines, the idea is that that would help calculate and establish the 12 months of revenue data that the CCOC uses for settle up. So the county fiscal year is October through September. So that's the 12-month revenue that's reflected on line 4. But then therefore, that's why we add in the prior year September revenue and take out the current year September revenue. And that establishes the 12 months that the CCOC uses for settle up. So that should mirror that. The CCOC trust fund on line 7 and the additional CCOC revenue on line 8. Both of those are also, again, those are auto-populated, but you can adjust that if needed. If you do adjust any of those 5 lines, please provide a justification of what changed in cell B31 in the additional information comments box. But again, this information should be pulled from your most recent version of your EC report that was used to establish the settle up that we submitted last month. So the CCOC trust fund revenue, again, on line 7, that's the quarterly amount that funded counties received from the trust fund. So you were sent that in 4 equal installments throughout the year. If you are a depository county, that will be blank. And then the additional revenues line on line 8, most years, this only has 1 entry. On the EC report, this will obviously only have 1 entry, but on the EC report, we only have the 1 entry, which is the budget amendment amount that we get sent out through the Department of Revenue, which is the cash for the unspent budgeted funds and the cumulative excess amounts that we send out. However, for 23-24, this line had 3 amounts on your EC report. It was the unspent budgeted funds and the cumulative excess payment broken out into 2. So there were 2 different entries there, as well as your county's allocation portion of the $8 million current year glitch fix that we were able to receive. So those 3 amounts totaled. But again, that should pull automatically and that should be correct. But all 5 of those are, again, automatically populated. So moving down, the court-related expenditures on line 12, that amount is automatically pulled from your entries on the actual expenditures tab. So those should equal, if you see an issue on the total number, then you'll likely need to go back to the actual expenditures tab and make adjustments there. The jury line on line 13, this amount for 23-24 is your actual jury amount that you were reimbursed from the JAC. So it won't be your total costs. And it also, this number won't equal your reimbursement amount for state fiscal year 23-24. We took 3 months of state fiscal year 23-24 and the first quarter of 24-25. So that way this will truly reflect your courtside costs for jury for county fiscal year 23-24. So that's an adjustment. If you look at your form, again, it's not going to mirror your jury reimbursement form, but it should accurately auto-populate your reimbursed amount in the funds that you received from the JAC for the county fiscal year. The next 3 lines in green are lines that are fillable. So, and they should be entered as negative. Anything that starts with less in the description in column B, that should be entered as a negative amount. So it's your Title 4D funded costs for the year. Line 15 is any county funding that you receive from the board. And then line 16 is any other amounts that you would receive outside of the ones above. So, that could be a local or state grant that you received for the year, or even any public records modernization trust fund dollars that were utilized to cover court-related expenditures. And again, for the lines 15 and 16, which are the board funding or the other funding, you'll be prompted to please provide an explanation of those dollars in the additional comments box at the bottom of the page. So moving down, your revenue limited budget authority will be auto-populated for you. Again, your expenditures are calculated from the previous tab and from this tab. Your unspent budget authority is also calculated from your entries on this spreadsheet. The less the payments to the trust fund in line 24 in blue. So this should reflect your excess payments that you made to the trust fund throughout the fiscal year. Again, that should align with your settle up numbers. And this was pulled from like above from your September EC report. So it should match what you identified on your EC report as your payments throughout the year. Again, this is in blue, so it's auto-populated, but since it's in blue, you can override it. If you do, again, please just provide an explanation in the additional comments box. Your due to or due from the CCOC settle up calculation on line 25. Again, that should mirror the payment that you made or received from the trust fund for settle up for 23-24. And then finally, all of that should culminate in cell E27 to reconcile to 0. So that number should be 0. If for some reason it is not, please just provide that explanation in the additional comments box below. Again, as a reminder, for anything in column B that starts with in brackets less, those numbers should be entered as a negative amount. Are there any, something else is in column F in blue. This is a reference to the 23-24 EC report. So these cells are where this number should mirror or where it's pulled from. So we just thought it'd be a good tie back to, if you have your EC report, you're looking at that, this is exactly where that data is coming from. Any questions on the reconciliation tab? Seeing none. Is anyone awake?
I am.
Appreciate the nap, Griffin.
I'm awake, Griffin.
Yeah, after lunch fun.
I've had coffee. I've been awake the entire time.
All right, that's good to know. Good to know. Okay, so then if there are no questions on the actuals, the third and final piece of this operational budget submission is the revamped current year budget projection tab. Again, we took the 10 tab format, which looked very familiar if you filled this out in the past, and we've condensed that down to 4 tabs, and hopefully making this a lot easier to fill out and hopefully take a lot less time for clerks and staff. So the front page remains the same. You want to enter your county's name from the drop-down box in cell B6 before you start the rest of the tab, because that will auto-populate a lot of your county-specific information on the other 3 tabs. So once you do that, it will pre-populate any warnings just like before. Only tab B will have warnings. We didn't code any warnings for tabs C and D, but we have some other pre-populated things like we just talked about that will mirror that. So any tabs or any warnings that come up here will all reference tab B. Like I mentioned earlier, the tab B personnel tab is the biggest tab and has remained the same. The work group did not address this tab in their initial review. So this is the tab where you enter all of your courtside FTE on each individual line. The clerk is always on line 5, and then under that, just like before, you can enter all of the appropriate vacancy data, the salary data, position numbers, benefit data. Everything should look the same. When you come over to columns AJ and AK, that's where we delineate your court and non-court percentages for all of the employees that you entered. So, like before, if you just enter the non-court amount in AK, the court side amount will automatically calculate in columns AJ. And then from AL on, those are auto-populated, and that's all based on the data that you entered up to row or column Q, and then based on your court percentage calculation in AJ. Once you've entered all of your staff, if you come over to the final column in AV and click the down arrow, if you unselect blanks, that will take any blanks below there. So you're only looking at your employees that you have, unless you have 1,305 employees. That's probably recommended. It will take off a ton of those lines, and it will roll that up. So everything is totaled on lines 1306. Your FTE total based on your entries is identified in cell B 1311. And again, this is fairly straightforward and remains the same from the prior years. Is there any questions on tabs A or B? Seeing none. Tab C. Now this tab, the work group took all of the prior year operational and capital cost tabs, and even some of the summary tabs, and merged it into this, which is by UAS code and is almost identical to the actual tab that we went over for the UAS code. So hopefully that creates some efficiencies as well when filling this out. So again, you're entering your current year, which in this case will be 24-25 budget data. Because of when this is due in March, even if you filled it out today, you would already have 4 or 5 months of actuals. So that should be fairly easy to budget. But in most years, when we move this form to due back in the November, December timeframe, or even in January, this will have less actuals. But for this year, should be fairly easy to accurately budget since it's late in the game. Same rules apply on this tab for any entries in columns K, L, and P, which again is the information systems, the legal aid, or the other, as well as anything on the capital cost line. You'll just be prompted to enter any information into the additional information box at the bottom of the page. Everything is totaled on row 48, and in column Q again. This also has a supplemental information, has a little bit less, and some of it's auto-populated, but please fill it out. Same rules apply for that. Again, that's not additional cost, that's just a detailed breakout of some of the salaries and benefits information entered above. So again, this is laid out the same way. It has the UAS account codes across the top, and then in columns B and C, it has the UAS object codes, again, broken out by salaries and benefits, operating costs, and then capital costs rolled into one line. So pretty straightforward. Any questions on the expenditures by UAS code tab? Seeing none. The final tab of this 4-tab spreadsheet is a similar reconciliation tab to the one we just went over. Has a little bit less data because it's budget projections. So for example, line 4 is just your fines and fees revenue projection. The CCOC would recommend for this one, if you want to take your June projections that you submitted to us, obviously update it with any new knowledge that you have, as well as the 4 months of actuals. But that would be a good reference for your revenue projections for the year. On line 5, this number is auto-populated based on the quarterly submission that funded counties will receive. So again, this will be 0 if you are a depository county. Your correlated expenditures are automatically pulled from your entries in tab C. So again, if you have any issues with this number on the reconciliation tab, you can go back to tab C and make those adjustments there. Your jury reimbursement amount is hard-coded. It's auto-pulled from your court or your actual jury cost that you enter on tab C. Same line items for 11, 12, and 13 from the previous tabs that we talked about. Again, these numbers should be entered as negatives, but it is your projected cost that you'll receive this year, your projected revenues that you'll receive from Title 4D, your projection you'll see from the board, and then any other funding items that you anticipate for the year. Again, anything that you enter for board funding as well as an other, that will prompt you to enter additional information in the box below. Moving down, revenue limited budget authority. Again, that's going to be automatically populated for you based on your actual budget for the year. Your CCOC expenditures are auto-calculated, as well as your unspent budget authority. The final line that's data that you can enter is on line 21 in column D. That's less the payments to the trust fund. This is one of the hiccups that we found. This should not auto-populate and should not be blue. We are working to address this. This will just be a fillable green box. It will be blank. So again, this will be fairly difficult to accurately project, but you know, just do the best that you can. But again, we'll send out a revised version of these forms. We'll post to the website and we'll send out a note, but this will just be a blank fillable line. Or if you just fill this one out, you can just override whatever's pre-populated with your actual projection. So again, the goal of this tab is to reconcile all costs down to 0 in cell E24. And if for some reason it doesn't equal 0 and all the adjustments are made, you can just enter a description of why that is in the additional information box at the bottom. So those are the forms and the tabs. Are there any questions on anything we've gone over so far? Miguel.
Hey, Griffin. So I had a question on the tab C, actually, the expenditures by US code.
Okay.
In the operating costs. So we're picking up the depreciation as well as capital costs. Like on line 41, we'll be picking up depreciation expense and also the capital cost on line 45. Because it seems like it's double counting, no?
That's a good question. I think, do y'all usually have capital cost? Because that would be, you know, any building type things, or at least for the state, it's certain high dollar purchases with FCO dollars. On your books,
Griffin,
yeah,
would you like me to answer this?
sure.
Yeah, Miguel, so we wanted this, this is Kelly in Union County. So we wanted this to basically match our modified accrual basis. So we realized that some clerks may have a depreciation. We couldn't imagine on the work group anybody that would, but what we didn't want to do was leave that cost off of this report. There be a clerk that had it, and then the report didn't work for all 67 counties. So we anticipate that all of the costs will only be in capital costs, but will not be in depreciation. But the idea was to simplify it for all clerks, that they could pull it straight off of their books that they're using to file their annual financial reports, and it be as easy as it possibly could for everyone. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so. It's like a compromise because I'm thinking, you know, if it's capital costs, then we've captured it at some point. And then if we do depreciation costs, which is basically just expensing the capital costs that we've captured in the past, it's kind of like a double count. Just, you know, just think.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that was some discussion that came up in the work group. So we just wanted to put the operating costs in from the UAS manual so that however clerks were keeping their books, they could put this in per their GL. And like we said, we anticipate after a few years that some of these would not be used. And once we see that, we'll probably remove them from the report. We just wanted clerks to be able to put in on this report however they're using their own general ledger.
Okay, understood. Thanks.
Sure.
All right, thank you for the question, Miguel. Thank you, Clerk Rhodes. Any other questions? All right, seeing no hands. All right, now Clerk Rhodes, would you like to share your screen and go
Yeah,
over
sure.
the actual spreadsheet?
Yeah, so sorry, I hardly ever use Zoom anymore. Help me out. How do I share my screen? I can't even see
I-
how to raise my
I
hand.
have to make you a co-host. That's my fault.
Oh, okay.
I'll do that right now. How about that? Did that work?
That works. Okay, so again, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because we all have a different accounting systems, and even within the same accounting systems, we all have different GL code setups, but we all should in some way, shape, or form be following the UAS code. So I've set up in Union County to withdraw data out of my financial system, and I've created this data table that just pulls it by UAS across the top and object code across the bottom, and then copy and pasted that into this worksheet. So that's how I pulled it straight out of it. It took me a few minutes to manipulate the data to get it into the same format. But once I did that, all I have to do is refresh as changes are made and
Clerk
then
Rhodes,
straight in. Yes, Welty.
um, I don't think you are sharing anymore.
Well, what happened?
I don't know what happened.
Hold on.
I think in the business, I think we call that operator error.
That's 100% what it is. All right. When did you lose me? How about that? Is it Sharon again?
It is not.
I never saw anything.
Well, I've got a big round, a big square around my screen that says I'm sharing. Still going to go with its operator error.
Oh, here we
I
go.
turned it off, turned it back on. Are we good now?
It's starting. There we go.
Okay. Right. I'll just claim operator error on that one.
I think that was a Zoom error. That clearly was,
Okay.
that's
Well,
clearly technology.
yes, it was technology. We'll go with that. So with that said, now that I've talked and you didn't see it, on the right is what I have pulled out of my own operating system. And the wonderful thing about this is once I have it set up, all I have to do is just tell it, hey, instead of pulling 24 actuals, pull 25 budget, and it's the exact same process. Now, I will say I was not able to write any formulas to pull it into the CCOC worksheet. So I had to copy and paste on some, and some it's faster to just key it in. Then on the reconciliation tab, and I know Griffin and I talked, and I called him going, it doesn't work. It wouldn't take, well, he told us in the training, you have to put negative numbers in. So if you put a positive number in, you get an error. So make sure that you put the negative numbers in for the CCOs for the other budget costs. And then as we were going through, one of the things I caught too is the way these formulas are set is it always reconciles to zero. It's changing our do from settle up. So Griffin, you may want to revisit those formulas when you push that worksheet out again, because I know you said you had a glitch somewhere, so that it's not, because I mean, if I'm plugging in just a grant, it's just changing my settle up rather than changing to zero. So really we should always be, we're government, so we should always be going to zero. If you're not, an explanation would be helpful. Just a couple of other notes. The separation payout, that was not the work group idea. That was instructions from the budget committee. That was information that they said that they needed. So our thoughts were, instead of laying it out separately, we just keep with the UAS reporting to keep it simple and relatively painless. and adding supplemental information at the bottom of the screen. And that's why that's reported separately, is because we know that that's included in your information above, but it's supplemental information that the budget committee directed that we collect on this report. The other thing I want to point out is we didn't mess with that god awful huge tab B, personnel information tab. Most of the members of the work group said that it was fairly easy for them to pull that information out of their HR systems. And so it is information that the budget committee needs. We could not do away with reporting that information, but we felt like it was as simple as we're going to get to provide the information that is needed. So if you're having a major problem, if that's a huge lift to get that information in, then I welcome you to send me an email or give me a call so that we can try to simplify it in the future. So does anybody, I just want to point out, make sure as you're working through this, it does change your, due to the settle up, it does change this amount as you're putting numbers in up here, or if you need to change the numbers in blue. So it's not really pulling from the CCOC EC report. So just make sure that that number is correct. And Griffin, if you do decide that you need to change those formulas, I'm assuming you will let everyone know.
Which formula were you saying?
Right. It's the formulas that you can't see.
Okay.
So as you're putting numbers in up here, like it changes my settle up to the CCOC. It doesn't actually tell me that I'm not reconciling to zero.
Gotcha. Okay, we'll take a look at that.
So with that, that's how Union County does it. I don't want to get too in the weeds because I know that we're all going to do it a little differently, but we hoped that seeing how someone does it may make it easier for you. Again, I welcome any emails or phone calls if you have any questions that I may be better versed at answering when it comes to a usability standpoint than CCOC. CCOC is going to be better with how does the form work.
That sounds good. Thank you, Clerk Rhodes. Any questions? Seeing none. Leonard, is there anything we forgot to go over?
Griffin, if I may, can I ask the work group members, give us a little feedback? Do you see that this is going to make your life easier? I saw that Clerk Brooks posted in the comments that his staff said it would. I know we've heard from one team that said it's causing them more work.
Any input?
Cliff Rhodes, this is Jamie with Martin. I was on your work group, so it's going to make our process a little more streamlined.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your help on the work group. Couldn't have done it without you, my friend.
You're welcome.
Agreed.
Okay, so at this point, I guess everybody loves it. Okay, Ms. Fernandez says it's still time consuming to enter information for over 900 FTEs. Yeah, and I know in Union County I have 7, so it's not that much, but I do apologize. We know that that's a heavy lift, but and if you have any information, if you have any suggestions for how we can streamline that, I'm open to hearing them. I'm happy to confer with the budget committee to see if we need to tweak this form a little bit for next year. So if you have any suggestions for how we could make it easier, again, understanding that we have 67 clerks that do things 67 different ways when we get this in the weeds, happy to hear those suggestions.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, Clerk Rhodes, and thank you to the work group. Is there any other questions on anything operational budget related? All right. Well, again, as you fill it out, if you have any questions or come across any issues, as always, please feel free to reach out to anyone at the CCOC. We're here to help. There's also the instructions online. If you have any recommendations on the instructions, since this is the first year, please send those to us as well. We're trying to make this as easy and painless as possible for clerks and staff, while still gathering the best, most accurate data that we can. Hopefully we improved the data that we collect, as well as hopefully streamlined and reduced the amount of time it takes to fill out some of this. So that was a goal. Again, thank you to Clerk Rhodes and the work group. If there are no other questions, comments, or concerns, I believe that concludes our training. Thank you again for taking the time to join us today.